Hello, dear friends. My name is Christian Elia, and I'm the Executive Director of the Catholic Civil Rights League. I was delighted when asked to do this for Chalice. First of all, I love Chalice as an organization, and many gifts have been given on behalf of me and my family over the years through Chalice. And we will continue to support Chalice, and I'm very supportive of their mission and their mandate. So I was very happy to contribute in a small way. Secondly, I'm very passionate about food, the process of making food, its presentation, the philosophy behind certain cuisines, and of course, let's get down to it, eating. There is one logical problem though. So although very pleased to do this, I was also a little bit concerned, is that my lovely wife Linda does the majority of the cooking in my family. She cooks for herself, for me, and for our three wonderful children, Francis, aged 14, Julian, aged 12, and our daughter Catherine, aged 10. However, are very much involved in other processes, especially the one I'm going to be speaking about right now. I'd like to start off by saying that my wife Linda, both her parents were born in Italy. She comes from a wonderful cooking tradition, so I'm very blessed for that. Also, because I'm half Italian. My mother was a German born Pole, and my father was born in Italy. My surname is Elia, which means the prophet Elijah. Elia is Elijah in Italian and Latin as well. So I grew up very blessed, enjoying Polish cuisine and especially Italian cuisine, and we're doing quite well now in our household. And that leads me into telling you about the process that it's a whole family affair and it's very important for us. And that is every late August, early September, the processing of the wonderful fruit that gets mistaken for a vegetable, the tomato, into the final product, which is beautifully jarred, passata, or the first passing of what will become tomato sauce, and the jarring process. This is something that is done and cherished by Italian Canadians, not so much Italians in Italy anymore. And there are reasons for that, and we'll discuss them. But first, let me tell you about why we would do this. So first of all, it there's a sense of the tomato is very important. It can be used for anything, but we would use it, of course, for tomato sauce. This is not tomato sauce, but it's the first step towards tomato sauce, which is used for pasta and everything else. The simple Italian tomato sauce. And there's nothing more glorious than using fresh tomatoes from your own garden. However, depending on where you live, and seeing that this is Canada, not the greatest country in the world for growing tomatoes, you might not be able to jar the passata using your own tomatoes exclusively. We do use our own tomatoes. However, living in Toronto, our garden is small and wouldn't be enough to make a substantial amount. So we buy beautifully imported or rather beautifully farmed tomatoes from Italian seeds, from local farmers, or even from Italian grocery stores here in Toronto. We buy a few bushels and we make the passata with those tomatoes, although we also make them from our garden. There are still some purists who make them almost exclusively with tomatoes from their gardens, but again, this is Canada, and depending on the quantity you desire, there won't be enough. But regardless, it's beautiful because as you're preparing for the winter, and we have a tradition of this in Catholicism as well, of course, there's a sense of the harvest. I know that there are many ways which we show our thanks towards, the food and the abundance that the Lord gives us. In the old calendar and in pre-Vatican II days, this was really marked by rogation masses and Ember Days. In particular, the one Ember Day that would fall in September around the feast of the exaltation of the Holy Cross, which was specifically for the harvest. These Ember Days, four of them in the old liturgical calendar, were confusing even in pre-Vatican II times as to what they were really about, especially in non-agrarian communities. But with masses at dawn, at sunrise, giving thanks for specific things. The September Ember Mass, in particular, for the harvest in general, but particularly the harvesting of grapes. Now, the grape is also very, very important to Italians. It's used among many things as wine. And of course, grapes are important to the church. In fact, wine that is used for the consecration for what's the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord at communion comes from vineyards. It's made specifically for that purpose, for wine used for communion. So, the Ember Days concentrated on things that were used for Catholics in our celebration, in our worship, particularly wheat for the species of the body of our Lord, and of course, wine for the blood of our Lord, for communion. But I think if you speak to most Italians, if they have an exalted fruit or vegetable, the grape, I think for wine, is certainly there. But I do still believe that tomato is king. So there's also a sense to there's a practicality. This practicality, and also out of necessity and scarcity in immigrant communities. There are 1 million Italians in Ontario in a population of 14 to 15 million. There are hundreds of thousands of Italians in Toronto. Same with Montreal and many other urban centers, and many in our smaller cities as well. Italian immigration to Canada has been a huge success story. But it wasn't always so. When Italians, the vast majority who arrived in the post-World War II period in the 1950s up until about 1963 to 1971, there was not an abundance of supermarkets that sold Italian products. Now it is possible to get imported tomatoes from Italy, so you have access to high quality tomatoes for making the best tomato sauce all year round. Certainly that was not the case. So in late summer, early fall, you would take all the fresh tomatoes you'd have and you'd find a way to preserve them through jarring so that you'd have a cost effective and especially delicious means of making tomato sauce all year round. So there was that. And that's one of the reasons why it's not done so much in Italy anymore. But those of us who are children or grandchildren of Italian immigrants remember this tradition and the immense joy it brings. So, in terms of a Catholic connection or theological connection, in addition to my boring little tidbit about ember masses in the old calendar and giving thanks, we see it as a wonderful family affair where the children get involved from picking the basil leaves off of the basil plants that we grow, because on the top of every jar there are a few basil leaves which are put in. So for picking them, washing them, and inserting them in the jar at the end, to turning the crank on the tomato machine. The Italians and Italian mechanical ingenuity a couple hundred years ago invented machines. There are, of course, electric versions and stuff with motors that make the process much quicker. But we use the hand cranking method, whereby you put the tomatoes, skin and everything, put the whole tomatoes in the top, you turn it, and magically what comes out is the most beautiful puree you could imagine, with the skins and the seeds gone. They go to a separate part of the machine into refuse. Okay? And so we each have our jobs, and it's a big, huge family affair, from taking turns cranking to putting the tomatoes in to using the little device to push the tomatoes down into the hole as the crank's being done, to, of course, the jarring process, and then inserting the jars and boiling them so that they stay properly sealed, as the jarring process for anything preserves are done. We each have our jobs, and this is done with great joy. and it brings us back to our roots when we did it with our parents or with our nonni, our grandparents. And then we have wonderful passata, and it takes the making of tomato sauce and from a multi-hour process, if you have your own passata ready to go, to a very short process all winter long. One of the children usually even has a job of keeping the wasps away. And I'm referring to the flying insect type, of course, not our Anglo-Protestant neighbors who are welcome to come in and help us join in the process as well. You figure there are a lot of wasps and other insects flying around in late summer, and they also enjoy the smell and the taste of tomatoes, it seems too. But this is what we do. This is what we do every late August, early September, and it's the same with thousands of Italian Canadian households across Canada. Ask your Italian friends and neighbors and ask them if you could join in the tomato making process, the passata making process. And there are always jobs to be done, and it will be a joyous affair, I assure you. And maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky, you'll be able to take home a couple of jars. Thank you very kindly, and God bless.